just in case.
Okay, we're live. 3, 2, 1. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 54. Today, last week actually, the EFF are one of our favorite sites for advocacy and privacy and transparency on the internet. Came out with this huge list of messaging platforms and their security ratings and what you should look for and everything else. And we thought, obviously, it's a good idea to go over them. So we brought Tom in, of course, to help me go through what I should be looking for in, I guess, instant messaging clients.
Hey, everyone. Hope you're staying nice and secure as it's getting colder outside.
So this came out last week, and I thought it was a pretty good list. I mean, there's a ton of stuff I've never heard of before. And this may be because I'm in the New York City bubble, but yeah, there's still a lot of stuff here.
Yeah, this is by far one of the best lists I've seen put together on messaging apps and, where they fall in the spectrum of security. It's really fantastic. The EFF usually does a really fantastic job at whatever they do, but this especially is wonderful.
I mean, we have, I don't even want to count, there's probably 50 on here.
Yeah, it's a giant list. And, of course, we'll have this all listed in the show notes if you want to check it out. And it's a really easy list to parse. It's not like this one is using AES 256 and this one's using bcrypt and this one hashes your stuff with, this thing. And it's really easy. Like, are the messages encrypted in transit? Are they encrypted so the provider can't read it? We'll go through the list, but it's really fantastic. And there's some things on here that are actually pretty surprising.
Let's see. So the first thing I looked for is one of our favorite messaging apps, Threema. Just go through the big guys, and it gets the checks all the way, except is the code open to independent review? Unfortunately, it's not, because they claim, look, they're a company, they're trying to make money, they kept it open source, or not open, sorry, the closed source, and there's no recent code audits. I think it's just because it's too new, it's not really out there, but it doesn't necessarily, but everything else, it's encrypted in transit, the provider can't read it, can you verify identities, are past communications secure if your keys are stolen? Is the security design properly documented? For me, I don't know about you, but I almost want to give it's good enough.
Yeah, not being open source concerns me because we can't truly be sure that they're not doing something nefarious on the back end. Like they could check all these boxes and it all looks good, but really to get the final word on security, you need people to look at your crypto. You need people to say, okay, this is free of really, hard to parse encryption vulnerabilities and to make sure that they're not susceptible to plain text attacks. And there's some really complex math that you have to get totally right in your encryption code, in your cryptography. And if you mess up one thing, the whole system can fall apart. And that's why being open source is so important for these applications. Is it really good? Yeah. Can you be totally sure? I wouldn't say so right now, but it's among some of the best.
And then the other one we were looking at, or I next went to, was BlackBerry. They have two different messengers here, BlackBerry Messenger and BlackBerry Protected. I don't exactly know what the difference is. All I remember is that everyone had a BlackBerry, and everyone wanted your BlackBerry PIN, which was a hex code, which was basically the shorthand of your encryption key. And everyone said, oh, that was bulletproof. And I'm looking here, and it only gets one check that it's encrypted in transit. And BlackBerry Protected is, I guess, the other one where the encrypted so the provider can't read it, and the security design properly documented. But the rest of them can't verify. You can't do all this other stuff. And I just thought, hey, I thought that was it. I thought that was the last word, and that's why all the governments held onto their BlackBerry. But apparently, the people in Waterloo can read it.
If you remember, and this is years and years ago, there was a government, and I want to say it was the Indian government, but I could be mistaken.
It was, you're right. India, and then Saudi Arabia,
Yep.
and then maybe Pakistan also joined in.
Yeah, they said, hey, look, we are not going to sell BlackBerry devices in this country. We will not allow them to cross the borders into our country because we can't monitor our citizens' communications if they're using these devices. And the company turned over the idea and they said, I don't know if we can really do this. That totally goes against what we want. And they ended up turning off the ability. They ended up putting a backdoor in, essentially, and giving the keys to governments and BlackBerry themselves. And it turns out that BlackBerry Messenger became entirely insecure after that date. And BlackBerry and anyone else who wanted could read your messages, and that's kind of why it's fallen off the list. Are the messages sent using SSL? Yeah, but could a government, law enforcement agency, NSA, could someone other than your own government in the place you're living look at your messages, or the company, or your cell phone carrier if they had a good reason? Yes, they could.
I mean, when I heard that story, I wish that BlackBerry stood up and said, you know what, fine, ban us. And I know India has 1 billion people in it. I'm sure China would have been slowly or right after them. There's another 1 billion people. There's probably at least half of the people who could potentially buy BlackBerries are now out. But if they said, you know what, we're the most secure, they may have had a slightly more fighting chance against the rise of Apple and Android and everything else.
They would have. They had the opportunity to become the secure alternative. And instead, they chose to have potentially increased sales numbers and to destroy the platform they worked so hard to create. Would they have survived against the iPhone? I don't think just that feature alone would have kept them afloat. But would it have helped? Yeah, I believe so.
So the next big one, I want to say the next biggest one would be iMessage. I think if we're going to go down the list of the most popular, was BlackBerry, but I think now iMessage took it over, and their only knocks are, can we verify the contact's identity? No, you can't. And is the code open to independent review? No, just like any other Apple software, it is not. But other than that, it looks we've documented the security. It looks really good. They audited whatever they could, and Apple, and we know Apple's been saying, you know what? We don't want to decrypt this for the government. We're going to encrypt iOS 8 and 8.1, and so, I mean, I guess they don't even have the backdoor. It does the secure element on the phone itself.
So now this has recently changed. Apple had the ability at one point in time to be able to decrypt iMessages if they were forced to, under penalty of perjury or with a subpoena or warrant or any other type of legal document. That's since been changed, and let's go through the categories here just so the listeners know. Here are the things that you either get a nice big check mark or you get a nasty red X. Are the messages encrypted in transit? Are the messages encrypted so that the provider themselves can't read it? Is it a trust no one platform? Can you verify contacts' identities? Is the person you're talking to, can you make sure they're the same person? Are past communications secure if your keys are stolen? This is perfect forward secrecy, and this is actually one of the things that a lot of encryption protocols and a lot of these services don't have right now, but it's one of the most important things that we need to get right. Because if your keys are compromised, and we'll go into one of the situations where that can happen, everything is gone. Unlike SSL with perfect forward secrecy today, if your key is compromised, well, I mean, that's unfortunate, but it's okay because the next time you establish a connection or after a set period of time, you generate entirely new keys. And those are totally safe again until those keys get stolen or cracked. The next thing on the list, is the code open to independent review? Basically what this means is the code open source? Can you request the source code? Can you look at this code? Can the community hammer on it and see if they can break the encryption or find a flaw? This is really important, as we mentioned before. The next thing is the security design properly documented? Did they just like blast the code out there and say, oh no, it's totally secure? Or did they actually go into some great detail in their documentation on how they're going to keep you safe? And then the last thing on the list, has there been any recent code audit? And this is important, and it's one of the things we haven't really seen in typical lists like this, which is, hey, has a trusted party actually taken the code, taken the product, and done a security review on it and found any flaws and pointed them out and had the company go back and fix them? This is really important, and it really needs to happen more in our security products. So like we said, with FaceTime and iMessage, both of these, they're encrypted in transit. That's easy enough to do. They're encrypted so the provider can't read it. Apple can't decrypt your iMessages or FaceTime chats anymore at all. It's great. And it's using perfect forward secrecy. So even if your keys are compromised, the next session, everything's totally brand new, renegotiated, and the NSA either has to steal those keys or they have to crack them, and neither of which are easy to do right now. The code is not open. It's not open source. It is properly documented, and it has been audited. So if you're using iMessage, it's pretty secure.
I mean, look, and nowadays, like we said, I think it's the #1 probably used messaging. And to be honest, you know what? It's probably really safe too, because look, what did Apple do? They got you off of SMS and they got you onto iMessage. And I wish they did SMS here, because for whatever reason, SMS is not on here. But I don't think they have any of these. It's just SMS is just wide open, and anybody with a cell phone, I don't know what they're called, the cell phone capture, packet capture, could probably get it.
Yeah.
So,
it's let's take a look at the next closest thing to iMessage that everyone on the other side of the fence is using, including me and you, because we use it all the time. As a matter of fact, we're using it right now. Google Hangouts /GChat /Google Chat, including their off-the-record button that you can check. What off-the-record does, for anyone who doesn't know, is it literally doesn't, the only thing it does is it stops saving history to your Gmail. That's it. It doesn't do any sort of security thing. It just stops saving the history of the conversation. So it's basically useless. The messages are encrypted in transit. Everything Google does, or just about everything Google does, is going to be over SSL. That's good. But everything else, except having the code audited for any really nasty security flaws, is a big fat X. It's Google can read your Hangouts. Law enforcement can read your Hangouts. You can't verify identities. If your keys are stolen, I mean, they're not encrypted anyway, so all of your communications are wide open to anyone who wants to review them. There's no open source, and it's not documented anywhere. This is kind of a black eye to Google Hangouts. It's definitely not a secure platform.
I mean, could it be that everything else around it is properly documented? So my phone is encrypted, so you would have to unlock my phone and get there to be able to see the Hangouts. My email has two-factor turned on, so to get to that you would need two-factor. Google encrypts everything. I don't know. Maybe they did maybe they just did the whole nonsense. Maybe they just said, you know what? If everything else is good, maybe we don't have to worry about this.
But on the other hand, the FBI can come up to them, or the NSA can give them a letter and say, hey, we want all of Tom Webster's communications, all of them. And by the way, this is a national security letter. You can't tell anyone. You can't do anything about this, or we're going to charge you $250,000 every day you don't comply. They could do the same thing they did to Yahoo. And Google at that point has to say, here's the whole book. Go have fun with it. And there's nothing we could do to stop that. If, like, some sysadmin at Google went, like, really rogue and super evil and decided to post all of our Hangout messages all over the web, they could do that because it's clear text to Google. They know what the messages contain. It's not encrypted in any way on the back end except SSL. And in this day and age, that's just not good enough.
I mean, you and I use it only because we're not sending any. We're discussing the time and the topic of the show next week or this week or whenever. Anything we want to send.
Anything really secure, we have each other's PGP keys.
Yeah.
And
and Threema. And here's the issue. The reason we don't use Threema for everything is because we're on all our different devices all day long, and Threema is only on the phone. Which when you look at all the ones that are considered really good, that's the problem. They're not on all the devices.
Right.
So you have to take that convenience there. What was it? There was another one. So after Hangouts, I guess we have to go to WhatsApp. WhatsApp is for the rest of the world who still relies on text messaging.
Yep. And it's got the exact same problems that Google's Hangouts does. Yes, the messages are sent over SSL. And pretty much every service sends over SSL. But we'll get to a couple who don't because they need to be called out. And the code's been audited for any gratuitous vulnerabilities. But other than that, it's not encrypted in any way. It is totally open.
And remember, it's owned by Facebook, which I will have to say, as bad as we make Facebook out to be, somebody said it, and they had it right. Facebook doesn't want anyone else having access to their information. So
Right.
They will keep it secure and siloed within them. They will secure it from end to end. They will do everything in their power to make sure no one else gets them other than them. So then
Yeah.
they can sell you ads and everything else, which is not, look, it's not good. It's absolutely not good. But
If
it's not
Facebook
also that
sells
bad.
personal information, they sell demographic information. They want to make sure, just like, any retail store wants to make sure people don't walk out of the store without paying for their products. Facebook wants to make sure people don't just walk away with all of Facebook's data. They've got a vested interest in keeping that stuff in their own silos.
So if you trust Facebook as a company, you can make a shallow point that they're doing a good job. If you don't trust them as a company, then obviously you can say, look, they don't care, they're just trying to sell to us. But WhatsApp is owned by Facebook.
Against rogue hackers. Now, when it comes to government agencies, anyone can go up to Facebook and say, hey, give me all of the details you have on this guy. And Facebook legally has to and can spill the beans.
Yeah.
The great thing about these encrypted so the provider can't read it messaging services is even if the FBI, the NSA, the Navy, and the Secret Service all went up to, let's pick one here, went all the way up to Apple, or they went to CryptoCat, or BlackBerry Protected, or Chat Secure plus Orbot, and they said, we need all of the messages you have for this dude. These companies that store messages so that they themselves cannot read it says, okay, look, here's what we have. It's random noise, and we can't decrypt it because we don't have the keys. We don't have anything here. We literally have garbage. We can't help you. And that is the case. And that's a good thing. That means that these companies on the other side aren't liable. The FBI, NSA can't go and do what they did to Yahoo, and they say, well, we're going to charge you a lot of money unless you hand over data. Because these companies can hand over the data they have because it's useless. It's garbage without your personal key. And that's really powerful. It keeps you safe, and it keeps them safe. It's good on both sides, unless you're harvesting data.
And then I'm trying to find any of the other big ones. What's shocking to me is Hushmail. So Hushmail was the first, what they called, it was a paid email service that was supposed to, hosted in Canada, I think, that said we're trying to be secure for your email. We're not selling your information or anything like that. And it turns out they only have encrypted in transit.
Yeah, the only thing, and we need to call this out because Hushmail is one of those companies that likes to say, oh, we're all about security and we're not going to sell your information or give you ads based on it and we're going to keep you really secure. They will willy-nilly turn over any piece of information to any government agency at the drop of a hat. The FBI can kind of sort of almost wink at Hushmail, and they like throw all of their data over the border to the U.S.
So
Hushmail needs to be called out as it's really a honeypot. It is designed that people with things to hide that don't do a lot of research go to Hushmail, they put all their secrets in it, and then Hushmail gives it to any government agency at the drop of a hat. You need to avoid them, and you need to stay away from them. They're dangerous, and it's been documented.
the other one, I'm looking here. Kik is another one that was big for a short time, and again, they have all red X's except it's encrypted. Again, I didn't take Kik as anything more than, hey, where are you at? You want to get coffee type thing. Most of these, I mean,
if we look at a couple of the classic messaging services, if we look at AIM, if we look at eBuddy, if we look at Facebook Chat, if we look at Yahoo Messenger, it's basically they're encrypted in transit, and that's about it. You don't get really any protections with those.
I mean, and then you look at, let's look at some of the good ones.
One of my favorites, and they did have a vulnerability, but they fixed it, and they're very responsible about their code. One of my favorites is CryptoCat, and they get straight A's across the board. You know, SSL, it's a trust no one service. You can verify people's identities. They're using perfect for secrecy everywhere. The code is totally open source. I know because I pulled it apart, and it's really nice code. It's totally documented, and it's been audited several times, actually. Across the board, a totally secure option for Messenger, and free, by the way. CryptoCat is one of those things that's just plain awesome. I love it.
Didn't they have the problem? Was it CryptoCat that you can only invite people to a group, but you can't kick them out?
I think so. I'm not sure if they've fixed that.
It was something weird where I remember something like that. They couldn't do it because you give them the key and that was it.
Yeah. And then we should really mention this. Anything using PGP or GPG. So things like Mailvelope, things like PGP for Mac, also known as GPG tools. Things like PGP for Windows or GPG for Win. Things like Enigmail, if you're using the Thunderbird add-in. I use it every day. It's fantastic. They're great. Encrypted in transit, encrypted so your mail provider can't read it. You can verify people's identities with signing. The code's open, typically, on PGP things. Really documented. Some of the documentation around PGP is some of the best. It doesn't really get regularly audited, though. And it might be that, you know, it's an open standard, people can look at it, and there just hasn't been anything formal in a while. But here's the big thing with PGP. If your PGP private key is stolen, it's game over. Everything is gone. It's all blown out of the water, and it's totally clear text to whoever has that key. So you really have to be careful about guarding your key and keeping your computer free of things that want to steal that. Other than that, it's a pretty bulletproof solution. And there are a couple bad guys that we totally have to call out. But is there anything else on the list that we should mention?
I would just go the ones across the board.
Yeah. So let's.
I mean, we have the black phone people, silent phone, silent circle, silent text. They're crazy across. Everything is checked. Everything's across the board good. But
red phone is good across the board.
I mean, Skype has nothing. Skype has just, it's encrypted in transit, and Skype is very famous for just handing stuff over. And the sad part is they were good. Before Microsoft bought them, they should have gotten checks across the board, but it's very famous that Microsoft sold them out to the NSA, and
there were actually documents, like law enforcement documents, that were published complaining about Skype because it was too secure, that people couldn't eavesdrop on Skype communications because the way Skype was built, the network and the nodes and the way it did peer-to-peer stuff and encrypted everything was too secure, and law enforcement just couldn't compete. They couldn't break into it, and they would complain about it. Well, right before Skype sold to Microsoft, they made changes so it basically centralized and removed a lot of those protections. And they did that for law enforcement. That's the only reason they did it. There was no technical reason they had to. Everything worked great, and Skype is worse off for it. It is not a secure platform anymore.
They had it. They were the way to go.
Yeah, it was easy to use. Everyone loved using it. It was secure by default, and people didn't have to do anything. It was the brain-dead, stupid, secure solution, which is like the unicorn in the land of security, where something is really easy to use and really secure at the same time, and they threw it away. They just threw it away.
Well, look, we have 4.5 minutes left, but I guess the thing to talk about is what do you need in a security platform? I mean, not a security platform, in a chat platform. Look, we talk about Google Hangouts and just sending messages back and forth. If that's what you're doing, then who cares? If you're just saying what you're going to do there, and it's convenient. Look, Hangouts is super convenient for us. We get it on Glass. We get it on all our devices. So for us, that's the way to go. But if I need to contact Tom securely, then I either have to use PGP or Threema, like we said. The problem is it's only on the phone. And with two of us sitting at a desk all day, you can't just look at your phone all the time.
Yeah.
Which is always my big rail against SMS. So then you go, well, if you need something more secure, it's hard to find because, like we said, it either works on your phone or it works on the desktop, but it doesn't work in both spots.
We'll include the link to the full list. A couple to call out quickly. Jitsi and Austell, the open source kind of Skype-ish program, that gets across the board except for the audit. They haven't had an audit. Mailvelope is good, but it has the same issues that PGP does, where if your keys are stolen, it's game over. And the off-the-record plugins for just standard messaging apps like Adium or Pigeon, really secure, haven't been audited. And there's two here on this list that I want to call out for being terrible. For not even using SSL, there is no security whatsoever. MXIT, Mixit? I don't know. I haven't heard of it. But also, and this shouldn't surprise anyone, QQ, which is probably the default messaging app for the majority of users in China. No SSL, no encryption, no nothing whatsoever. And it has got a huge user base, and it is 100% insecure. Stay away from QQ.
There you go. Look, it's a good list. Again, we'll show it in the show notes. Has a lot of good things. Find out if I had to ask you, what's the most important checkmark to have?
The most important checkmark would be this second one, encrypted so the provider can't read it. If you can be assured that your communications are going to stay secure, whether or not the business is bought or sold or infiltrated by secret agents, that's going to be the one, because that's going to keep you safe in the majority of circumstances.
Okay. I mean, I was looking at that, and I was looking at the other one, the past communications.
Yeah.
I mean,
I would say that's very important. The concept is fairly new to these messaging apps. It's going to be really hard to find something that does all of them. And like we said, iMessage and FaceTime, they're rocking it out. Google's got a ways to go to catch up.
I have a feeling if it becomes important, if people listen to us, they start pushing, we want more security, another Snowden leak or something like that, I can see that the next thing happening, that they're just going to do that.
I hope so.
So, anyway, we got a minute left, but, I mean, I think we're done. I don't think we have anything other than just rehashing what we've just been saying for the past half hour.
Yep.
So, with that said, everyone, we will see you next week.
See you, everyone.